The Sacramento Kings are balling. After the Kings traded away Tyrese Haliburton last season, many expected the Kings not to be all that good going forward. But currently on the season, the Kings have a 9-6 record and are the 5th seed in the Western Conference. And not only are they winning, they're playing very high level basketball as well. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Sacramento Kings have been one of those teams that just haven't been good for a very long time. And there were a bunch of different reasons for that, but just quickly touching upon the main reason, it's certainly due to management. Poor drafting over the years, alongside with making poor decisions in free agency, alongside with trades, just made the Sacramento Kings not a good team for a very long time. And I mentioned this in some of my videos, but having great leadership at the top, talking about your president of basketball operations and your general manager, is extremely important because of course they build your roster. And if you have guys at the top that don't know what they're doing or aren't all that good at their job, your team probably isn't going to be all that good. And I think the Kings in the past are exactly what you don't want to do as an organization. But things started to change a little bit over the past couple seasons, where it seemed like the Kings finally started to draft effectively, at least a little more effectively than they did in the past, and they finally were starting to build somewhat of a young core. But although the Kings didn't make the playoffs, of course, at least they were building towards something. Now, the Kings made a very Kings move in a lot of people's minds, where they traded away arguably their best player and their best point guard in Tyrese Haliburton, who at the time was showing a ton of promise, and at this point has still shown a ton of promise, and in my opinion, he's going to be a phenomenal player for the Pacers. But although me and many other people don't think the Kings should have traded away a great young player like Haliburton was, at the same time, I do think the Kings still have a pretty nice core built for themselves. And the player that they did get in return for Haliburton in Sabonis actually has been very good for them. Now, of course, this isn't a surprise. Sabonis was great throughout his entire career thus far, but it's certainly nice to see him fitting in well with the young core of the Sacramento Kings. Now, of course, besides Sabonis, as I mentioned before, the Kings also have some nice other young talent on the roster. The main player that stands out has to be De'Aaron Fox. Now, originally when De'Aaron Fox was drafted, he had a ton of hype around his name, and rightfully so. He played extremely well. And throughout the years, De'Aaron has been one of those players that just continuously improved their game season after season, until eventually he got to the point where now he's having the best year of his career. Now, one thing that I will say is the hype kind of died down a little bit around De'Aaron Fox's name last year and the season prior. Now, the reason why that happened, in my opinion, is more so due to the team play of the Sacramento Kings rather than individual play from De'Aaron Fox himself. Because when you look at the statistics, as I said, he's been improving his game every single season, so it doesn't really make all that much sense to lose faith in De'Aaron Fox at this point. But on the year this year, he's averaging 25 points per game on an incredible 54% shooting from the field, 5 rebounds per game on 6.3 assists. Just an incredible year. And those type of numbers, alongside with the team success that the Kings are having early on into the season thus far, are certainly worthy of an all-star appearance in my opinion. Even though he plays in a very tough Western Conference to make the playoffs and very tough Western Conference to make the all-star game. There's so many good players that are deserving of such an award. But that 1-2 punch that the Kings have created between De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis is honestly a very good one in my opinion, due to the versatility of it. The fact that Sabonis also has decent passing and playmaking abilities himself, alongside with the ability to roll or pop, just gives that pick and roll or pick and pop offense so many different dynamics. But besides those main two guys, the Kings have done a nice job to add other players around them as well. For example, Kevin Huerter. He's been a player who's been very good for the Atlanta Hawks basically throughout his entire career, but this season he's also played extremely well for the Kings, and he's fit in very nicely as that catch and shoot 3-point shooter that can also do a little bit more than that as well. And that overall new dynamic and that new wrinkle that he's adding into this Kings offense, in my opinion, is something that's very beneficial for them, and we've seen the results thus far. Now, a young guy that they just brought in Keegan Murray has also been playing pretty well early on into the season thus far. Malik Monk has even been playing pretty well. Davion Mitchell has been alright for them, I would say. Harrison Barnes is always Harrison Barnes, just a decent player, I would say. anyway, but overall the accumulation of talent that the Kings have on their roster currently, in my opinion, makes up for a pretty good team. Now, a question that you may be asking is, yeah, the Kings have certainly gotten off to a pretty good start, and especially as of late, but is this sustainable throughout the regular season? Well, in my opinion, I certainly think this Kings roster is good enough to make the playoffs in the Western Conference, as crazy as that may sound. Because when you actually look at their roster, they have a ton of talent from top to bottom. And for a team like this to make the 7th or 8th seed in the Western Conference, maybe even the 9th, that still is considered the playoffs, I certainly don't think that's unrealistic whatsoever. And honestly, based on the talent that they do have, I probably would expect them to, at the bare minimum, be the 9th seed in the West. Now, would I consider them to be a top 5 seed in the Western Conference? That certainly I would not expect them to do so. Now, if they continue to play as well as they have been, of course there's a possibility, but I just don't think it's very likely that they'll be able to hold up this level of play throughout the entire season, at least being the 5th seed in the Western Conference. But now, what are my expectations for the Kings long term? And if the Kings are able to make it to the playoffs, I wouldn't expect them to do all that much in the playoffs. I would certainly expect them to lose in the first round, but if they're able to put up a good fight, I certainly think that would be a huge success for them. Now, that might sound a little ridiculous. How would losing in the first round be a success? But when you consider the last time the Kings made the playoffs was around 20 years ago, making the playoffs in general would certainly be a success for this team. But now, what are my expectations for the Kings going forward long term? Well, similar to De'Aaron Fox's growth, I kind of see the Kings' growth in a similar pattern. They do have a very nice young roster at this point, the key being a young roster, because typically when you have nice young cores, over the years you typically expect a team like that to consistently improve season after season, little by little. So for the Sacramento Kings, I would expect exactly that, for them to improve a little bit season after season. And if, for example, they're able to make the playoffs this year, then next year I would like to see them maybe make it past the first round. And then the season after that, go from there. Just get a little bit better year after year, and if they're able to do that, I certainly think the Kings could turn into a pretty good team in the long-term future. Now, I don't see them being a championship contender in the next 5 or 6 seasons unless they make significant changes. Either A, some of their homegrown players improve significantly, or B, they bring in a star in free agency, or maybe even multiple stars. But at this point, I certainly would not expect that whatsoever. But at this point, I'm just excited to see the 1-2 punch between Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. I think that's your foundation, and the Kings need to do whatever they can to build around those two going forward long term. And specifically for this season, the more defense and the more shooting they can add to their roster right now would be a huge benefit to them for the season. So if they're able to go out and get a Jay Crowder, for example, during the trade deadline, I think that would make this Kings team that much better. But I guess we'll see what happens down the road. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Sacramento Kings could be a very good team in the long-term future as well as this season, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.